My grandmother smiled across a crowded birthday party and asked a question that made the entire room go silent. "Sweetheart, how are you enjoying the house I bought you?" I stared at her. "What house?" The smile disappeared from her face. My aunt dropped her wine glass. My cousin suddenly looked sick. And within minutes, a family secret worth hundreds of thousands of dollars began unraveling in front of everyone. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Claire Bennett, and until that moment, I thought I knew my family. I was 32 years old and worked as a nurse at a local hospital. The job was rewarding, but it was also exhausting. Long shifts, missed holidays, and constant stress had become a normal part of my life. Money was always tight. I lived in a small apartment with rising rent and spent years trying to pay off my student loans. While many people my age were buying homes and starting families, I was focused on getting through each month without falling behind on bills. Still, I never complained much. Whenever my grandmother needed help, I made time for her. I drove her to appointments, picked up groceries, and visited whenever I could. I loved her, and spending time with her never felt like a burden. That afternoon, our entire family had gathered to celebrate her 80th birthday. The backyard was full of relatives, food, music, and laughter. Everything seemed normal. I spent most of the party helping Grandma greet guests and making sure she was comfortable. Then, during a toast, she looked directly at me and asked that question. The strange reactions around me made my stomach twist. My aunt couldn't look me in the eye. My cousin suddenly became very interested in his phone. Even some relatives exchanged nervous glances. I didn't understand what was happening, but one thing became clear. Everyone at that party seemed to know something that I didn't. And for the first time in my life, I felt like an outsider in my own family. 5 years earlier, Eleanor Bennett had made an important decision. She wasn't a wealthy woman compared to some people, but she had spent her entire life saving carefully. After selling a piece of land that had been in the family for years, she suddenly had more money than she expected. Instead of spending it on herself, she thought about the people she loved. One person kept coming to mind: Claire. Eleanor had watched her granddaughter work harder than anyone else in the family. She saw the sacrifices Claire made and the way she always put others before herself. One afternoon, Eleanor met with a real estate agent and looked at several properties. Most were too expensive or needed major repairs. Then she found a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was outdated, and the yard needed work. But it was clean, safe, and close to the hospital where Claire worked. Eleanor immediately knew it was the right place. She bought the house with one goal in mind: giving Claire a stable future. She imagined Claire finally having a place to call her own instead of worrying about rent every month. The purchase made Eleanor happy. She wanted it to be a surprise. Because her eyesight had been getting worse, she needed help handling some documents and legal details. Reading small print had become difficult, and she didn't want to make any mistakes. So she turned to someone she trusted completely: her daughter, Linda Parker. Eleanor explained everything clearly. The house was meant for Claire and no one else. Linda smiled and assured her there would be no problems. She offered to take care of the paperwork, organize the files, and make sure everything was handled correctly. Relieved, Eleanor thanked her. Over the next few weeks, Linda regularly updated her mother and claimed the process was moving smoothly. Whenever Eleanor asked questions, Linda always had answers ready. Everything appeared normal. Every document Eleanor was shown seemed legitimate. Every explanation sounded reasonable. As far as Eleanor knew, the gift was safely being prepared for Claire's future. She had no reason to doubt her own daughter. What she didn't realize was that Linda had already started making decisions that would change everything. A few months after the purchase, Linda learned something that changed the way she looked at the house. During a meeting with a local real estate agent, she heard that a large commercial project was being planned near the neighborhood. New stores, offices, and restaurants were expected to be built in the area over the next several years. Property values were predicted to rise fast. The small house that seemed ordinary today could be worth much more in the future. That information stayed in Linda's mind. At first, she tried to ignore it. But the more she thought about it, the more she convinced herself that the property should stay within her own household. She began telling herself that her son, Tyler, needed it more. Soon, those thoughts turned into a plan. Because she was handling the paperwork, Linda had access to documents, records, and legal contacts. She quietly made changes that Eleanor never noticed. By the time everything was finalized, the house was no longer connected to Claire. Instead, ownership had been placed under Tyler Parker's name. When Linda finally told Tyler what she had done, he was shocked. He immediately understood that the house had never been intended for him. For several days, he struggled with the situation. He asked questions. He worried about how his grandmother would react if she ever found out. But Linda assured him that nobody would discover the truth. She insisted that she was protecting the family's future. Eventually, Tyler stopped arguing. The opportunity was too valuable to walk away from. As the years passed, he became comfortable with the arrangement. While they benefited from the property, Claire knew nothing about it. She continued living paycheck to paycheck. Unexpected expenses constantly appeared. A car repair, medical bills, and rising rent made it difficult to save money. Many nights, she came home exhausted after long shifts at the hospital and wondered if life would ever get easier. Not once did she suspect that a house had been purchased for her years earlier. Not once did anyone tell her what had happened. Linda stayed silent. Tyler stayed silent. And anyone who knew pieces of the story chose not to ask questions. The secret remained buried, while Claire continued building her life without the support that had been meant for her all along. The years that followed were not easy for Claire. No matter how hard she worked, it always seemed like something went wrong. When she managed to save a little money, an unexpected expense would wipe it out. Some months felt like a constant battle just to stay ahead. During family gatherings, relatives often talked about promotions, vacations, home improvements, and investments. Claire usually sat quietly and listened. Whenever money came up, someone would eventually ask why she was still renting. She would explain that she was trying her best and saving whenever possible. Most people nodded politely, but the conversations often left her feeling judged. Linda always acted concerned. She would tell Claire that things would get better and encourage her to stay positive. Tyler did the same. He often spoke about making smart financial choices and planning for the future. To anyone watching, they appeared supportive. What Claire didn't know was that Tyler's financial situation was improving every year because of the property. The rental income provided him with opportunities that Claire never had. He paid off debts, upgraded his lifestyle, and built savings. As time passed, some family members began comparing the two cousins. Tyler was described as successful and responsible. Claire was described as someone who couldn't get ahead. The comments were rarely direct, but she heard them. People suggested she should manage her money better. Others hinted that she wasn't making good life decisions. Those remarks hurt more than she admitted. She knew how hard she worked. She knew the sacrifices she made every day. Still, defending herself never seemed worth the argument. Instead, she focused her energy on the people who mattered. Eleanor's health slowly required more attention over the years. Claire continued helping whenever she could. She drove her grandmother to appointments, helped organize medications, and spent weekends visiting her at home. Many times, Eleanor thanked her and told her how proud she was. Those moments meant more to Claire than money ever could. Even when she felt overlooked by the rest of the family, her grandmother's kindness reminded her that someone appreciated her efforts. She never expected rewards or gifts. She simply believed that doing the right thing was enough. Unfortunately, not everyone in the family shared that belief. The cheerful atmosphere disappeared almost instantly. After hearing Claire ask, "What house?" Eleanor looked genuinely confused. She laughed at first, thinking her granddaughter was joking. "Claire, the house I bought for you years ago," she said. "The one near the hospital." Claire stared back at her. "I don't know what you're talking about, Grandma." The conversation caught the attention of everyone nearby. Several guests stopped talking and turned toward them. Eleanor's smile slowly faded. "No, that can't be right," she said. "I bought that house specifically for you." Claire shook her head. "Grandma, I've never owned a house." The silence that followed felt heavy. Eleanor looked around the gathering until her eyes landed on Linda. "Linda, tell her. You handled everything." Linda froze. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she forced a smile and said there must be some misunderstanding. Her response only made the situation stranger. Eleanor frowned. "What misunderstanding?" "I told you exactly what I wanted done." People began exchanging confused looks. One relative asked where the house was located. Another asked when it had been purchased. The questions kept coming. Tyler, who had been standing nearby, suddenly looked uncomfortable. He avoided eye contact and barely spoke. His nervous behavior did not go unnoticed. Someone asked him directly if he knew anything about the property. Before he could answer, Linda quickly interrupted. She claimed she couldn't remember certain details because it had been so many years. That explanation made little sense. Eleanor clearly remembered buying the home. The more questions people asked, the more inconsistent Linda's answers became. At one point, she claimed the property had been sold. A few minutes later, she suggested it might have been transferred. Neither explanation matched what she had said before. The confusion quickly turned into suspicion. Eleanor's expression changed from concern to disbelief. She knew something was wrong. Very wrong. For years, she had trusted Linda completely. Now, standing in front of family and friends, she felt that trust slipping away. The birthday celebration was forgotten. Cake, decorations, and gifts no longer mattered. The gathering had become something else entirely. A family secret was beginning to surface, and nobody could stop it from coming out. The days after the birthday party were tense. Eleanor could not stop thinking about what had happened. The more she replayed the conversation in her mind, the more certain she became that she had been deceived. A week later, she contacted an attorney and asked him to investigate everything connected to the property. She wanted facts, not excuses. The attorney began gathering documents from county offices and reviewing old records. It did not take long for troubling information to appear. One afternoon, Eleanor and Claire sat together in the attorney's office as he placed several documents on the table. The room felt quiet. The attorney carefully explained what he had found. The house Eleanor purchased years ago had never been transferred to Claire. There was no record showing Claire had ever owned it. Instead, ownership records listed Tyler Parker. Claire felt her chest tighten. She stared at the documents, hoping there had been some mistake. But there wasn't. The paperwork showed a clear transfer that had happened years earlier. As the investigation continued, more details emerged. The property had been rented out for a long time. Payment records, lease agreements, and tax filings showed a steady stream of income. Year after year, money had been collected from tenants living in the house. The total amount was far higher than Claire expected. It wasn't just a few missed opportunities. It was enough money to have changed her life. She could have paid off debts years ago. She could have built savings. She could have had stability during some of the hardest periods of her adult life. The realization hit her harder than she expected. This was not only about a house. It was about trust. The people responsible weren't strangers. They were family. People she had spent holidays with. People she had supported and respected. Eleanor looked heartbroken. She kept apologizing, even though none of this was her fault. Claire tried to reassure her, but she was struggling with her own emotions. Anger, disappointment, confusion. All of it mixed together. For years, she had wondered why life seemed so difficult while others moved ahead. Now she finally understood part of the reason. Something meant to help her build a future had been taken away before she ever knew it existed. And the truth was far worse than she had imagined. Claire hoped that once the truth came out, Linda and Tyler would admit what they had done. She expected anger and difficult conversations. What she did not expect was their reaction. Neither of them apologized. Instead, they immediately became defensive. Linda claimed that everyone was overreacting. She argued that the situation was complicated and that the house had been in the family the entire time. Tyler followed her lead. He insisted that he had done nothing wrong and said people were unfairly attacking him. As the arguments continued, they shifted the focus away from their actions and onto Claire. Suddenly, she was the one being criticized. Linda began telling relatives that Claire only cared about money. She said Claire was creating conflict over something that happened years ago. Tyler repeated the same message whenever family members questioned him. Unfortunately, some relatives accepted their version of events. A few people admitted privately that they believed Claire deserved answers, but they did not want to get involved. Others chose the easier path and sided with Linda simply to avoid family drama. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. Phone calls grew shorter. Invitations stopped coming. People who had known Claire her entire life started treating her differently. The most painful part was hearing distorted versions of the story. Some relatives acted as though Claire was demanding something she had never earned. Others ignored the fact that the property had originally been intended for her. It felt like history was being rewritten right in front of her. For weeks, Claire struggled with disappointment. The betrayal from Linda and Tyler was bad enough. Watching other family members defend them made it even worse. She spent many sleepless nights thinking about everything that had happened. Eventually, something inside her changed. She realized that staying quiet had never protected her. Remaining polite had not stopped people from judging her. Avoiding conflict had not brought her any closer to the truth. For the first time in her life, she stopped worrying about making everyone comfortable. She stopped worrying about who might be upset. What mattered now was standing up for herself. The facts were on her side. The documents were on her side. And she was no longer willing to let others decide her story. If her family wanted a fight, she was finally ready to give them one. Once Claire decided to fight back, things moved quickly. Eleanor made it clear that she would support the case completely. She hired an experienced legal team and paid every expense necessary to uncover the full truth. The attorneys began examining years of records in detail. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Several documents contained signatures that experts questioned almost immediately. After careful review, investigators concluded that some paperwork had been altered during the transfer process. Dates did not match. Certain records had been changed after they were originally filed. Important information had been removed or replaced. The deeper the investigation went, the more evidence appeared. Former office employees who had worked with the paperwork years earlier were contacted. Some remembered unusual requests. Others recalled being asked to process documents that seemed rushed or irregular. Their statements supported what Claire's attorneys had already suspected. Additional records created a clear timeline showing exactly how ownership had been redirected. The evidence painted a picture that was difficult to deny. As the case moved into court, Linda's explanations began falling apart. Every hearing brought new facts into the open. Every witness added another piece to the story. The judge listened as attorneys presented documents, records, and testimony collected over months of investigation. Claire attended each hearing quietly. She didn't need dramatic speeches. The facts spoke for themselves. Meanwhile, news of the case spread through the family and local community. People who had once believed Linda's version of events started changing their minds. Questions became harder for her to answer. Trust that had taken decades to build disappeared quickly. Tyler faced growing pressure as well. Financial records showed how much he had benefited from the property over the years. His claim that he knew very little about the situation became increasingly difficult to believe. By the time the final hearings approached, the truth was no longer hidden behind rumors or family arguments. It was written in official records. It was supported by witnesses. It was presented in open court. The story that Linda and Tyler had worked so hard to protect was finally exposed. For the first time since this nightmare began, Claire felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Because after years of deception, the truth was finally standing where everyone could see it. Months after the case began, the final decision finally arrived. Claire sat beside Eleanor in the courtroom as the judge delivered the ruling. The outcome was clear. The court found that the property had never been transferred according to Eleanor's wishes. The evidence showed that Claire had been wrongfully deprived of something that was intended for her from the beginning. Ownership rights were restored. For the first time, Claire felt the weight she had been carrying start to lift. But the ruling did not stop there. The court also reviewed years of financial records connected to the property. After considering the rental income and other damages, a significant financial settlement was awarded. The decision recognized not only the value of the home, but also the opportunities Claire had lost because of the deception. Linda and Tyler faced serious consequences. Legal costs, financial penalties, and repayment obligations created major losses for both of them. The situation they had worked so hard to protect had completely fallen apart. Outside the courtroom, word of the ruling spread quickly. People who had once questioned Claire suddenly changed their attitude. Relatives who had stayed silent now wanted conversations. Others who had believed the rumors reached out with friendly messages and invitations. Some claimed they had always supported her. Others insisted they never knew the full story. Claire listened politely, but she remembered everything. She remembered who doubted her. She remembered who looked away when she needed support. Most importantly, she remembered who chose convenience over truth. For years, she had been expected to accept unfair treatment without complaint. Now the same people expected her to act as though nothing had happened. She refused. Claire did not seek revenge through arguments or public humiliation. She did something far more powerful. She set boundaries. She stopped chasing approval from people who had abandoned her. She stopped making excuses for those who had failed her. Her success became her answer. Her peace became her answer. Watching her move forward without them was something many of those relatives never expected. In the end, the greatest victory was not the money or the property. It was knowing that the truth had won. And for the first time in many years, Claire was finally free to build a future on her own terms. Life slowly became peaceful again. After everything was settled, Claire spent several months thinking about what she wanted for her future. She visited the property a few times and considered keeping it, but eventually decided it was time to move forward. The neighborhood had grown significantly over the years, and the property's value had increased far beyond what anyone had expected. When she sold it, the sale brought a substantial profit. For the first time in her adult life, Claire had choices. Instead of rushing into a decision, she carefully searched for a place that truly felt like home. Eventually, she found it. It was a beautiful house with a large front porch, a quiet street, and enough space to welcome friends and loved ones. The moment she walked through the front door, she knew it was where she wanted to begin the next chapter of her life. But Claire wanted to do more than simply enjoy her success. She never forgot the difficult years she spent struggling through nursing school and trying to build a career while facing financial pressure. To honor the person who had always believed in her, she created the Eleanor Bennett Scholarship Fund. The scholarship helped nursing students who were facing financial hardships while pursuing their education. Each year, deserving students received assistance that made their journey a little easier. When Eleanor learned about the scholarship, she was deeply touched. Knowing that her gift had ultimately helped so many people brought her great comfort. Not long afterward, Eleanor passed away peacefully. Before she left this world, she saw the truth come to light and witnessed justice being served. That meant everything to Claire. Through the experience, she learned an important lesson. Family is not defined by shared blood. Family is made up of people who stand beside you when life becomes difficult, who tell the truth when it matters, and who remain loyal when loyalty is tested. One evening, Claire stood on the porch of her new home and watched the sunset. As a gentle breeze moved through the trees, she thought about the question that had changed her life forever. How are you enjoying the house I bought you? A question that uncovered betrayal, revealed the truth, and ultimately led her to the future she deserved. The end.